What's up, Dragon Brood? Today we are now looking at all of the cards previewed for Innistrad Midnight Hunt. That is 277 that are there and available, which means now we can just talk about the set as a whole. Now that we've seen the whole picture, we have kind of some ideas of what's going on and what's going to be good, what's going to be bad. So now let's talk about what my favorite top 10 cards are in this set. And let's talk about them. Alright, our first card we're going to talk about is Arlinn the Pack's Hope. By the way, somebody probably asked why 13 cards? Because I said 10 initially, but I thought, you know what? It's Innistrad, so we're going to do 13. Also, we're going to do these in alphabetical order, so this isn't like a ranking of best, worst, whatever. This is just easiest to go alphabetically. So we're going to start with the Arlinn the Pack's Hope. And the reason I like this card is that it's not bad on any level. Like, it's a 4-mana planeswalker, so very affordable to play. It can make 2 creatures when it comes into play, which is also good. It's got 4 loyalty, which isn't the easiest to kill. And you're not always going to play it on the front side because of how the whole day-bound, night-bound works. If it's already night when it comes into play, well, then you're looking at Arlinn the Moon's Fury, which is going to produce mana, which is great. So on turn 4, you may actually be able to play a 4-mana creature and be able to play 2-mana creature. Now, I did say creature because though this is a planeswalker, this is able to come into play and be a 5/5 werewolf, indestructible, haste. So you get your choice there. I mean, this is really good. And think about this. Like, if you do play it on the backside, right, it comes into play, you can make it a 6 loyalty and still have a 2/2 potentially, right? There's a lot happening here with this card. It's actually pretty slick. So big fan of Arlinn. We'll see how powerful she ends up being. Honestly, Arlinn could also be played in non-werewolf decks and probably still be useful if it's built the right way. But mostly going to be a werewolf planeswalker. But yeah, just a cool card all the way around. I really like it. Even just the ability on the front to be able to like play stuff at haste speed or flash speed and be able to get a +1/+1 counter, I think is really strong. Just lots of cool stuff going on with this card. A very well-made, well-balanced, powerful card. The second card up for me is Burn Down the House. I mean, this is a 5-mana sorcery, but I mean, we've been paying 4 mana or 5 mana for sweepers for a while now, so this isn't particularly new. I just love the versatility of it. I've been seeing a lot of decks already that are creature decks that people want to play sweepers in. I don't think that's necessarily the best plan, but I've seen it a lot on the ladder, so I know it's a thing people do. This actually fits into those strategies very well, in the sense that if you don't need a sweeper, you don't end up having this dead card. You can produce 3 1/1s with haste, or 3 1/1 blockers that are going to go 3 damage to your opponent, right? Or 3 things you need to sacrifice. Like, that's a thing where, you know, it's 5 mana for 3 creatures. Granted, they're 1/1s, but they also have an upside of dealing 3 damage. So neither option on this is bad. I almost wanted to say that, like, just getting the 3 tokens would have been like, meh. But the fact that you can get the 3 tokens and have them have haste is also very good. Because, again, you can use it for some, like, mid-rangey decks that may want a sacrifice component. Maybe you need some feeders to sacrifice things to, but when your opponent sweeps the board and you don't have those things, go ahead and just attack. So I actually like this card quite a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see a lot of it. And honestly, dealing 5 damage is a lot. Like, we have things that can survive 4 sometimes, but surviving 5 is very tough. Man, I have so many nice things to say about Champion of the Perished. I mean, it's just, like, all around the card's just good. Like, it's a callback to the old set, which is always nice. It's flavored the same way, so when another zombie enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of the Perished. So it just gets bigger the more zombies you play. This is the type of creature you definitely want early in the game. Also, when we're talking about having things be harder to kill, you know, you need to get this to 3, 4, 5 toughness pretty easily. It's just a cool card. I mean, this is one of the types of cards that zombie decks were missing in current standard, right? People have been wanting to play more zombies. You didn't have that many quality 1-mana creatures. This slots in there perfectly and just does a lot of work. So yeah, this card, expect it to be very popular because people love zombies, whether you're going to be playing mono black or blue black. Probably blue black, but either way, you're going to see a lot of people playing this. I wouldn't be surprised in paper if this thing ends up being a $5 to $8 card, just because so many people love playing zombies. But yeah, this is a simple card, but a key card in being able to build one of the popular factions or theme decks within the game. Delver of Secrets. I want to hate this card. I really, really do. The card's just super good. Like, I will say there are times you have Delver of Secrets and he just doesn't flip for like 3 turns and it's annoying. But truthfully, just the backside of being, you know, you're going to play with enough instants and sorceries in a lot of the decks that want it. To be able to turn it into a 3/2 flyer is just really, really good. Now, it is possible that in standard formats you may end up blocking with it more often than you want. But I don't know how accurate that is, truthfully. It's very possible you may end up being able to attack with it, and all your burn and whatever just goes at your opponent's creatures to keep them from attacking you. We could also look at this and decide if this fits into some type of wizard-style deck that wants to be able to play more spells to pump their creatures. Maybe this fits into something like that, I don't know. But the card itself is good enough, and we've seen it be good enough in older formats, that you have to assume people are going to try to build decks with it. Now, is it going to be dominant? Probably not, but all it has to do is just be very good, and that's going to be good enough. I mean, and for 1 mana, it's such a low investment to take a risk and test it, and it's on an uncommon, so everybody can get it, whether you want it in paper or arena. Should be no problem to get your hands on 4 of these. Alright, Fateful Absence. This one, I kind of went on a little bit on previews. I think this might be the best white removal card printed in a long time. Very much, probably since, I mean, dare I say, all the way back since any of the 1 mana ones. I mean, I think this is better than all of those. I mean, the thing is this, like, we've had some other cards that, you know, would exile a creature and do a thing, you know, and gave your opponent slightly some upside or whatever. But this is a chance to destroy a creature or a planeswalker, so it gives you that extra versatility. You do give them a token that they can draw with, but it's not a guaranteed draw. Like, that means the opponent does have to spend 2 mana to eventually get the card. Some people have been trying to compare this to Baleful Mastery, which I don't think is necessarily accurate to do, because I've cast Baleful Mastery for 4 many times, you know, and even when I cast it for 2, the opponent gets the card right then. There's a lot of times they don't have 2 mana open, and them having to spend 2 mana to sometimes not do something else on their next turn is actually really good for you. Like, you don't like giving them a card, obviously, but if you're taking down a big enough threat, then it's worth it. Especially in current standard, you know, you're getting rid of probably an Onyx, or maybe, I don't know, Lolth. Like, I would give them a card, you know, them spend 2 mana to have a card to get rid of that, especially at instant speed. And that's the other thing too. This being an instant is what I think really pushes it over the top. If it was sorcery and I gave them a card, that'd be a little bit different. But the fact that it's an instant, sometimes I'm going to be able to do it during their end step. I can do it after they've already spent their mana. So it delays the card draw or them making use of the mana. So there's lots of fun stuff about this card. How ubiquitous will it be in standard? I don't know, but I expect a lot of people are going to play this as removal of choice. Especially in the aggro decks where, like, they don't care that much if you're going to get to spend 2 mana down the road to maybe do something. Like, they're going to try to finish you on turn 5, 6 anyway. So, yeah, I'm into this card. Now, this is my card number 6, and this is Gisa, Glorious Resurrector. And Gisa, if an opponent controls would die, instead you exile it. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you put all those creatures exiled with Gisa, Glorious Resurrector onto the battlefield under your control, and they gain Decayed. Basically, Decayed is just they can't block, but if they attack, they die. So, or they're sacrificed at the end of combat. So the interesting thing is you are getting all your opponent's creatures, and you know you get 1 shot with them effectively. But that's not even really the best upside. The fact that this card is just exiling all your opponent's things is actually pretty good. Especially in a set that's going to have a lot of things that have disturbed, or some type of flashback ability, or whatever, you know, things coming out of the graveyard, or things that care about creatures being in the graveyard. This is going to be a way to keep all of that from happening. And that's not telling anything else we get that may be popping up in Crimson Vow in another 2 months. So this card could be very powerful, even if you never get real use of opponent's significant size creature. Just keeping your opponent from ever having access to them could be good enough on its own. This also gives us 2 creatures now because Valentin, I believe, the Valentin and Lizette, right, the double face card from the last set. No, yeah, no, previous set actually allows you to do the same thing. So you can keep your opponent's creatures out of the graveyard infinitely. But the upside is, if you do kill an opponent's creature that may be one of these big werewolves or something, well, then you get to swing with it next turn. And some of these have abilities that make tokens and other things. So who knows? The upside on this card could be very high. Now, I don't think this card's going to be dominant in any way, shape, or form. And decks that play it are probably only going to put like 2 of them in there. But it is a 4/4 for 4. So if you just have to go to war with it, you're kind of all right with that. Infernal Grasp. I think this is one, I believe it or not, I've seen a few people even debating this, if it's worth paying the 2 life to kill a creature. The answer is yes. Like, because here's the thing. If the creature was going to deal 2 damage over 4, 2 damage twice, 3 times, if I don't kill it, well, I'm dealing 2 instead of taking 6. Or if it's even like a 4/4 or a 5/5, well, I'm taking 2 instead of 5, or whatever, right? So it's kind of simple math to work out for yourself. You can also put it in several decks. Like, let's say something along the lines of Orzhov Clerics is being played. Like, it's very possible they don't care. They're gaining life anyway, so just paying 2 is just a bonus. They don't care. Like, it's allowing them to get rid of any threat they want that's in front of them. I think it's pretty strong. The downside is the card doesn't have versatility, so against possibly some mid-rangey decks, for sure against some control decks, the card's not going to do a whole lot. So it's going to be a little less fun in best of 1. I think you still play it. You're just going to know there's going to be times it may not be as useful as, say, some of the other stuff that lets you get rid of a planeswalker or a creature. Like, the versatility is nice. But to be honest, 2 mana, instant speed, really no restrictions on what creature you can target. Like, this is all around very solid. And it's an uncommon, so very easy for people to get their hands on. I expect to see this card get played for a long time, maybe even outside of Standard. Yeah, since they're kind of like the centerpiece of the set, you know how to talk a little bit about more werewolves here. But here we have number 8, and it is Kessig Naturalist. It's a red and a green 2/2. Whenever it attacks, you add a green or a red. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases in. So it means you can carry it through the attack step all the way up to the end of turn, which is pretty nice. Could allow you to play something else. The other fun thing is, on the backside, it gives all your werewolves and wolves a bonus, but then also, whenever it attacks, add a red or a green, and then until end of turn, that mana doesn't leave, and then you have a 3/3. So this card on both sides is very good. And again, it might come out just on the Nightbound side, and then you're already going to have a bonus to your creatures, plus get the extra ability. So this is actually really nice. And the fact that it works when it attacks, so it's not even just like when it enters the battlefield, you get like 1 shot at it. I like that part of it. It's really cheap and affordable to cast at 2 mana for a 2/2, possibly a 3/3 for 2, which is also good. There's a couple of things you can play on turn 1, not many, but even if you get 1 good swing with this, and you go from, say, 2 mana on turn 2 to 4 mana on turn 3, that could be really big as well. Then there's also some weird scenarios where, you're playing this alongside like a Jaspera Sentinel, and then that opens up some different doors for things you can do. So just lots of stuff that this card is probably going to enable just because of that extra mana. And it's not a sizable creature. It dies to, obviously, most sized removal, but I'm okay with that. I think this is actually the type of card you want decks to be able to play, that there's a reasonable upside and ceiling to them, but at the same time, you can deal with them. So this adds a good amount of back and forth play, allows some versatility to the werewolves, but at the same time doesn't have anything insane that the opponent can't necessarily deal with. All right, my number 9 is Lunar Frenzy. This one is an X and a red for an instant. Target creature you control gets +X/+0 and gains first strike and trample until end of turn. Please, 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 stop comparing this to Embercleave. These are not the same. Embercleave functions very differently than this does. Different size creatures want an Embercleave versus wanting a Lunar Frenzy. The upside on both is completely different. Like, they are not the same. Do they have similar words in some spots? Yes, but let me give you a rule of caution. We talked about this on my streams, and we talked about it a little bit in my Discord. But too often I see people compare cards to older cards, and that leads them down a road of mistakes because they try to use both cards the same way. And here is one of those examples. Like, if you put Embercleave on let's say a 2/2 or a 1/1, that's not going to be the most exciting thing, right? You might just be able to trade for the most part something blocking it, and that's about it. And you're still going to lose your creature. Here, you can use sometimes the same amount of mana you would have spent to play that Embercleave, let's say even 4 mana, right? Now you have a +3 that's going to first strike straight up and be able to kill that 4/4. You don't trade anymore, right? Even that little bit is a difference. But then also later in the game, let's say you had to spend your mana on something that has haste and you're attacking with all your stuff. Well, then you only need 2 mana open during that attack step to use an Embercleave. You're always going to need something like probably 4 to 5 mana to really take advantage of a Lunar Frenzy. Right? Nothing wrong with that. I think Lunar Frenzy is a very good card. I'm going to put it in a few lists and use it myself. But the reality is the cards are not the same. They function differently in different situations. So good and bad to both, honestly. And there's even the reality that once you use an Embercleave, it's still on the field. So you can figure that into, your combat math or whatever, or your mana usage over a couple turns. Lunar Frenzy does not do that. Like, it's one and done, and you just hope it does its thing in the turn you do it. So just want to toss that out there. I think it's a good card. I think it's still worth playing. I just don't think it's the same as Embercleave. All right, my number 10, Moonveil Regent. And I know some people are probably going to hate this card, but I think a 4/4 for 4, where you only need 1 colored mana, is awesome. It's flying, which is great. Whenever you cast a spell, you can discard your hand. If you do, you draw a card for each card in that spell's colors. So the thing is, even if you just hold onto a land late in the game, the next spell you play is basically discard a card, draw a card. Even if it's a single color. If it happens to be multicolor, then great. You discard a card, you draw 2 cards. Like, there's almost going to be no downside to this. And then when Moonveil Regent dies, it deals X damage to target creature, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. So very likely, you're only going to have... Well, actually, not even target creature, it's just to any target. And you're only going to have maybe 2 colors, possibly 3 a lot of times when you're playing this. But that's still fine. It's a 2 or 3 free damage when the creature dies. Like, kind of hard to complain about that, really. I'm into it. Like, it's a solid attacker. It's a solid blocker at a 4/4 for 4. Honestly, it's a 4/4 for 4 mana that comes with a pretty big selection of abilities. Flying, ability to possibly get you more cards, and an ability to kill something on the way out. Hard to complain, really. This is probably one of my other ones. This is my number 11. That's going to get people a little probably ruffled in the feathers, but Guardian Savior. I think this card's actually pretty good. And a lot of people, I think, are looking to be like, it's a 5 mana, 3/3, blah, blah. But here's the thing. Like, imagine playing this late after your opponent's Blood on the Snow or whatever else, and you get 2 creatures back. And the 2 creatures for 2 mana or less could be a lot of different things. I mean, even just slotting this right into something like a Cleric's deck or a mono white aggro deck or whatever, you can get back Luminarch Aspirant, I don't know, Cleric of Lifespawn. There's so many things you can get that could be useful to help in a couple of different situations. So paying 5 mana to get a 3/3 and possibly 2 other 2/2s or 3/2s or whatnot could be very good. That's a lot of power and toughness across 3 creatures for 5 mana. That's really nothing to turn your nose up at. Now, does it go into a traditional like Angel deck? Probably not. And you can't really reanimate it because it says when it's cast, then you get those abilities. So I think it's good, though. Again, I don't think it's one of those ones you need to go out and get 4 of, but I do think it's very possible that you just want a couple of these, put them into a deck, and then they're a late game bonus. And the card itself flies. So there's that. Even if the things you get are just on the ground chump blocking, you do have a 3/3 flyer in the air. All right, so here we are at Teferi, who slows the sunset. I know some people are like, bah, Teferis. But the reality is I like this one. I don't think it's too oppressive to where people should hate playing against it, but I do think it's actually good and versatile. A bunch of people said, well, it doesn't really defend itself. I said, but, that's fine. So, +1, choose up to 1 target artifact, up to 1 target creature, and up to 1 target land. Untap the chosen permanents that you control. Tap the chosen permanents that you don't control. And you gain 2 life. So you can untap an artifact and a land. And that's pretty cool. You're not necessarily going to have a creature. But if you do have a creature that attacked, you could untap it. And then that is what protects Teferi. The -2, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 in your hand, put the rest in the bottom. -7, you get an emblem with untap all permanents you control during each opponent's untap step, and you draw a card during each opponent's draw step. Now, here's another interesting thing about Teferi, which I don't think people have really discussed, but we think about Teferi fitting into slower control type decks. But it's very possible that this could be a Teferi that fits into aggro decks. I mean, because think about the ability, right? So let's say you go turn 1, 2, 3 creature and turn 4 Teferi. Well, now you can tap down that blocker that may be about to stop your, I don't know, sizable Lunar Aspirant or whatever it is, which is like a 4/4 now. And then they don't get to block. But then you get to attack and you get to untap your creature, right? So, like, there's a lot of things going on. Now, admittedly, you'd have to attack first and see if they block or not. Or you could just tap their thing, untap something else, and just leave it there to block next turn. But I think there's some uses for this to actually be able to take advantage of Teferi in an aggro deck, or at least a mid-rangey deck. And that's something I haven't seen come up yet. Now, admittedly, it's going to take a little work to come up with a build for that because, you know, we have to go back through all the cards again in the set and see what we could put together, or maybe even next set. But I don't think it's strictly a control card, whereas I think for a while, the Teferi cards we've had only fit in control shells. Now, it may still be benefited to playing Azorius control or Jeskai control or some such, which, fine if it does. But just saying, there is a possible application here, and I think I'd like to explore that. All right, and the last one on our list, the Meathook Massacre. And this card, again, don't compare it to the Bastion. I know a lot of people are trained like, oh, this is just like Bastion of Remembrance. No, it's not like Bastion of Remembrance. It's both better and worse, again, because it has the ability to be played in almost any deck it wants to, just to be able to kill creatures. That alone is already big. Anybody has any type of control type deck, this becomes very powerful, right? Because for 5 mana, 6 mana, you're probably going to wipe out most of what's on the board a large chunk of the time. But then it has upside. If you have a creature that dies, you get to, your opponent loses life. If your opponent loses a creature, you gain a life. So that fits more into a control type build more than it does into the sacrificial, pest, whatever type build that normally want to play something like Bastion of Remembrance. And the other thing on Bastion of Remembrance is you're both gaining life and your opponent's losing life just from any one of those triggers going off. That's not the case here. This is one-sided, so you have to find a way to make the other side happen. Now, you can do that by playing like Dina's and some other things or whatever, but it's not as automatic. So, and it's a different mana cost. Let's also put that out there. Like, if you just want either the life gain or the life loss, then it just costs you 2 mana, which makes it actually cheaper and more efficient than playing the Bastion. But the other side of that is, if not, it's going to be more expensive. Also, look at the fact that it's a legendary enchantment. That's the other thing. Whereas Bastions, you could play in multiples. You can get 2, 3, all 4 of them out if you wanted to. But here with the Meathook Massacre, it's legendary. So you don't really get more than 1. And that makes a big difference also. All right, that's it. That's my 13 cards that I have ranked up high in the set. Now, admittedly, there's a bunch of other good cards. There's going to be a bunch of other things that get played in Standard. I'm not saying these are the 13 best cards in Standard. These are like my favorite, my top favorite cards that I probably want to build around. Though most of these I do expect to have people or see people playing in Standard and really doing a lot of stuff with, because they're all pretty versatile cards for the most part. But yeah, this set has already proven to be very interesting. It's going to be a centerpiece of Standard for the whole time it's legal, and I think that's a very good thing. And because we got a bunch of new cards for theme decks, I think that's going to keep some of the casual to mid-level players excited as well. So this is kind of what we needed to shake things up a little bit. So hopefully we're not wrong about a lot of these, and we do get the little bit of shake-up that we wanted. And even if we don't, we only got to wait 2 months for Crimson Vow. So we'll see what happens. Kind of a neat idea to put 2 close together like this. We'll just see how it works. As always, let me know what you think. What are your favorites? Do you think I'm crazy for any of these? Was there anything you expected to see on my list that wasn't? Or surprised that something was? Let me know in the comments. Also, remember, if you want to come join our Discord, follow me on Facebook streams or on Twitch streams. All those links are in the description below. And if you haven't, like, subscribe, follow, support, all that good stuff. Not just me, but every content creator that you follow, because that's how our stuff really gets out there and gets the algorithms to want to push it, as if you are sharing it, putting it out there and talking about it. But that's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.